welcome to the Friday edition of the Here We Go podcast. Normally, I don't do a solo podcast on the same day that Colin and I are going to be doing a live show, but I just wanted to touch kind of solely and individually here on the Davante Adams trade talks. I think it's something important to talk about. There's obviously a lot of different opinions on this. So I want to talk about, why the Steelers should be for the Davante Adams trade, why they should be against the Davante Adams trade. And then I'm going to give kind of my own personal thoughts on this as well. So kind of diving into this thing, obviously, Davante Adams, first and foremost, he's still a fantastic player. He's in his early 30s. He'll be turning 32 this year. He's a guy who is an elite separator when he is a route runner. I mean, just solely as a route runner alone, he can separate with the best of them in the league. That is something Pittsburgh desperately needs, because when we talk about the current wide receiver room, none of them, including George Pickens right now, are very, very good at separating. Now, George has gotten much better, don't get me wrong, but he's not in that elite status yet. Davante Adams is an elite route runner, an elite separator, and a guy that you could count on in pivotal moments to get open on a third down when you need it. Now, right now, if it's not George Pickens, it's nobody. Pat Freiermuth is very good at getting in zones and finding a way to get open and things like that. I think he's a reliable third down target, but he's not, and I need a third down, and I need to have somebody beat man coverage one-on-one and go win the day. That's just not who he is. He's not athletic enough to do that. So from the sheer standpoint of need, the Steelers should make this trade. They should find a way to make it work. So let's talk about what that looks like. I mean, obviously the contract right now is one of the things that would hold this team back from making a deal, in my opinion at least, because I just don't think you give up a third-round pick, which I think is where this ends up, for a guy who you may only keep for one season. If the contract stays exactly as is, the best case scenario is you trade for him with about a third-round pick, you have him for the remainder of the season, and you cut him in the offseason if you won't allow you to rework the current contract. Now, he doesn't have guarantees in this contract. The guarantees are very minimal. So, from that standpoint, I don't think it's an issue at all. I just don't think the team should trade for a guy just to have for the remainder of one season and then cut him, especially with a third-round pick. The third-round pick is a guy that you're looking to be a staple of your team down the road, even if they're not an immediate starter. I disagree with some people who think a third-round pick's a guy who's not going to play right away. We've seen third-round picks play right away. I think you need a third-round pick to be a starter in the salary cap era, even if they're not going to be the best guys on the field. I just think the problem is this team needs a receiver so desperately that my ideal situation for this would be to trade for Davante, and already have a deal worked out where they rework this contract. I ideally want him, and I said this in the live on Wednesday, I ideally want him to be here for this season, guaranteed for next season, and a third year, basically team option on that deal. Because by that point, you'll have 2 full seasons with him almost, where you see if there's any real decline. Justin Fields appears to be ascending. Pair him up with Justin Fields and George Pickens. Let's see what this offense can truly do. Even with an offensive line that right now hasn't been playing very good, it's also a pretty makeshift offensive line. You kind of need to get somebody in there who is going to help this offense continue to grow. And Adams is exactly the kind of guy who can do that. Justin needs some help. He's been throwing into some of the tightest windows out of every quarterback in the NFL. It's basically him and Kyler Murray at this point as far as the guys whose wide receiver room has the least separation. And believe me, if you saw the chart, they're buried on that chart. It's bad. Adams would open up throwing lanes for Justin to give him some easy throws. He needs some easy throws. You can't force this kid to win it all for you every single time. He's kind of carried the offense through 2 consecutive games now, and you don't want that to continue. And I think an easy reason to say that this team needs Adams isn't just the route running. It also would bring a veteran receiver to a young wide receiver room to help guys like Calvin Austin learn the route running in the NFL. To even help George Pickens continue to improve his route running. Learn some tricks to the trade. Roman Wilson, a rookie, trying to find his way. And trying to find a role in this offense and at least get a helmet. How influential could a guy like Davante Adams be on a guy like that? And listen, I hear people talking about, oh, Adams threw a fit in Green Bay. Adams threw a fit in Vegas. Have you seen what he's dealt with in Vegas? There's not a top-tier receiver in the world who wants to play there. Their quarterbacks have absolutely sucked. Jimmy G was getting him hung out to dry and killed last year. Everybody's going to throw a fit in a situation like that where you're in a terrible team, in a terrible system, and you are literally the only bright spot outside of Josh Jacobs on the entire offense. Now that Jacobs is gone, it's just Davante Adams. Of course he's going to throw a fit. The team sucks. He doesn't want to deal with that later in his career. He wants to win. In Green Bay, what everybody talks about with him throwing fits and stuff, that stuff was minor. I mean, there wasn't like big fits that were being thrown. He was pissed off at the quarterback situation because Aaron Rodgers is his guy. And the team was playing around with Aaron Rodgers. There's other things to that, but I mean, listen, every wide receiver in the league that thinks of themselves in that top 5 type category are going to throw these fits when these games aren't going their way and they're not getting the ball and they want certain things to be a certain way. There was not that much drama in Green Bay. I'm sorry, he was there for a long time. He did not create a lot of drama in Green Bay, and people saying that, you clearly just didn't watch the Packers very often. Since my wife is a fan, we watched a lot of games, and he did not create a lot of drama. I'm sorry, but you guys are just overreacting to the situation. Yeah, he's done it in Vegas, but look at what he's dealing with. My God. Look at what George Pickens has done this year versus last year. Because they're getting him the ball. He's been a completely different player. You're not seeing these temper tantrums and him throwing fits and creating issues on the sidelines anymore. He's getting the ball. Carolina's not having issues with Deontay Johnson. He's getting the ball. Wide receivers are divas. That's just the reality. If Adams comes to this team and he gets his touches, I'm telling you right now, this dude is not going to throw fits. He's not going to be a team distraction. He's going to be nothing but helpful. And anybody saying they don't want him because, he's going to create drama for the locker room. Number one, you've not watched him play for very long. Number two, clearly you haven't seen Van Jefferson play. And I'm not sure many of us have seen Van Jefferson play because it's hard to fucking remember he's even on the field. He's that bad. He is horrible. That dude is not an NFL wide receiver. He shouldn't even be on a roster right now. He has 5 catches and 139 yards. You'd rather ride with Van Jefferson than get Davante Adams. Get real. I mean, I see legitimate arguments online right now on Twitter about people talking about his attitude being the reason why they wouldn't trade for him. It's a 3rd-round pick for a guy who's still a top 15 wide receiver in the NFL. You don't want that guy on your team. He would cost us about $11 million this year. You don't want that guy on your team. You've got to be crazy. You clearly do not understand football if that's your hang-up. This team needs a wide receiver. And whether it's Davante Adams or whether it's somebody else that they find here through the trade deadline, they need to make some kind of a deal if they want to have any chance of success in the playoff. The defense can only carry you so far. We saw the defense have a bad game against the Colts, and everything was on Justin's shoulders because the run game never got going, and everything went to George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth. He did get the ball to 6 different receivers, but nobody else was even relevant. Nobody had a number of more than 2 catches. We need a receiver bad. Davante Adams is going to be the best receiver that's on this trade market. If you don't want that guy, you're nuts. You better pray to God Omar Khan gets the deal done and finds a way to rework this contract so that we can keep this guy around for a couple of seasons. Calvin Austin is not going to be a guy who racks up 6-7 catches a game. That's pretty apparent. He had 5, I think, in the Chargers game. He had a really good game that game. And then he went right back to who he is. Last game, he had 1 catch, 17 yards. And it's a big catch. Don't get me wrong. And I hope he gets more. But he's not a guy that you're going to put in the game on 1st and 2nd down, throw him on the outside and say, listen, you're going to be a guy who we trust to get open and make plays, and you got to help in the blocking game. We saw his 1 attempt at a block this year. He got thrown 5 yards backwards. And Jesse Bates comes up and makes a tackle. Or no, I'm sorry, he was blocking the outside guy. The cornerback threw him 5 yards backwards. George just basically completely whiffed almost on Jesse Bates. Calvin's too small to be an every down player. I hope he gives more production than what he's done so far. But I'm not expecting a whole lot out of him. Roman Wilson's not going to be your savior. The dude can't even get a helmet right now. I want him on the field because I think he's a better receiver than what we've put out there so far. But obviously the team disagrees. And I'm sure there's a reason for it. They see him day in and day out. He clearly isn't ready. He's not going to be our savior. And he's not an outside guy anyway. He's strictly a slot receiver. You need somebody on the outside. We need to get a deal done. If there's anybody better out there than Davante Adams, I would be extremely shocked. There's just no way it's happening. If you're this team, you want Davante Adams to be in Pittsburgh. Ultimately, I do think he ends up in New York because I think he wants to be in New York. I was shocked to find out he does not have a no trade clause. The biggest piece of the puzzle here, in my opinion, is because he doesn't have a no trade clause, and because the Jets are in this all-in mentality right now with Rodgers, I could see them throwing a third-round pick, not reworking the deal, and not even caring about not reworking the deal. They would be perfectly fine to get him for the rest of the season, and they don't care who they have in the wide receiver room if they can upgrade it. And I honestly don't blame them. You're trying to win a Super Bowl for a franchise that has been so bad for so long. Why wouldn't you go all in on a guy like Davante Adams to pair back up with Aaron Rodgers, where they have fantastic chemistry, and get this thing done? And Adams has made it perfectly clear he wants to be with Aaron again. He talked about it in the summer. I think that's where he's going to try to go. It's just a matter of, is the Jets front office going to offer a trade comparable to everybody else in the market? I don't think they get a 2. I just do not think the Vegas Raiders are going to get a 2 like they're talking about. It's probably going to be a 3. And I think if the Jets offer a 3, this deal gets done. And that's just the way it is. So I'm hopeful as a fan that Davante becomes a Steeler. As somebody who's trying to be realistic doing a podcast right now, I don't think that deal gets done. I do not think Omar Khan will overpay. That's not his style. He is a numbers crunching type of guy. He's not going to get desperate. He didn't do it with Brandon Ayuk. If he's not doing it for Ayuk, who's much younger, he's not going to do it for Davante Adams, despite the needs. Because we're 3-1 right now with the current wide receiver group, there's no incentive being pushed to go get real desperate and overpay for somebody. So I don't think it happens. Maybe I'm wrong on this. Let me know what you guys think. If there's some things I haven't covered on this that maybe you see differently than what I see right now, I'd love to hear about it. As always, like, share, subscribe. Hit the little notification bell so you know when I go live. Colin and I are trying to stay consistent every Wednesday and Friday at 8 p.m. Be seeing you later tonight talking about the Cowboys. Hope y'all have a good weekend.